She was 20, newly married and full of dreams. But just 9 days after her wedding, Jennifer Judd was brutally murdered in her Baxter Springs home. This is Ozark Crime Watch, and tonight we ask the question still haunting Kansas: who murdered Jennifer Judd? Welcome back to Ozark Crime Watch. My name is Josh Shackles, and today we are investigating the case of Jennifer Judd. I am excited, as always, to have a great team of investigators here with me to uncover the details of this case. Let's meet everybody.
Hey everybody, it's Connor back again this week. It's your Joplin transplant from Pacific Northwest. I'm excited to dig into this one, again learning about another case from the 90s, right around the time when I was born. I'm excited to learn more.
Hi, I'm Joe Johnson. I'm lifetime resident of Joplin, and I specifically remember when this case came out, so I'm interested in digging in and finding out what we can come up with tonight.
Hi, I'm Sal. These stories aren't just true crime to me. They remind me of people that I've loved and people that I've lost. With a background in grief work, I try to show up with compassion, curiosity, and the hope that giving voice to these lives might offer some healing for the families and for all of us who are listening.
Hey y'all, Sarah Moore here. The Ozarks have been home for years, and my curious mind never lets a mystery sit still. Let's dig in and see what we can uncover tonight.
Hey y'all, I'm Whitney. I'm a lifelong mystery lover, true crime junkie, and the kind of person who can't resist a good whodunit. I'm excited to be back with the team this week and looking forward to digging into this case.
Hey guys, I'm Amy, and I have lived in the four-state area on and off my entire life. But I guess I consider myself a local since I've been here for about 20 years now. So I'm a fan of true crime, but I am really partial to Joplin history and am really enjoying shedding light on these cases.
Hi, I'm Susan Starling. I grew up in Pitcher, Oklahoma, and I met Jennifer whenever I was about 5 years old. We were childhood friends and teammates on the same softball team. Her parents coached us and drove us around and took us to lots of games. I enjoyed summers with her and spending time with her family. And I'm here to honor her memory and shed some light on how her life was and how life has been since she's been gone.
And Susan, we really appreciate you being here to help talk about the details of this case. This is one that I've certainly heard about my entire life, and I'm excited to get into the case file, so let's get right into it.
The case file. It was supposed to be the happiest time of her life. On May 2nd, 1992, 20-year-old Jennifer Diane Bryan Judd stood in front of friends and family to marry her high school sweetheart, Justin Judd. A bright and vibrant woman from Pitcher, Oklahoma, Jennifer had been a standout athlete in high school, playing both basketball and softball. Petite, with sandy brown curls and eyes full of warmth, she had been described by those closest to her as full of life, kindness, and hope for the future. Her wedding day marked the beginning of a life she had long dreamed of, one filled with love, home, and the possibility of children. That dream, however, would last just 9 days. On the afternoon of May 11th, 1992, Jennifer was found brutally murdered inside the modest duplex she shared with her new husband in Baxter Springs, Kansas. The small community, tucked along the southeast corner of the state, was stunned. In a region where neighbors still looked out for one another and doors were often left unlocked, Jennifer's death shattered the illusion of safety and opened the door to 3 decades of unanswered questions. The morning of May 11th began uneventfully. Justin Judd left their apartment in the pre-dawn hours to work his shift at a chemical plant about 9 miles away. At around 9 a.m., he realized he had forgotten his lunch and called Jennifer, who said she would bring it to him later that morning. But when his break came and went and she hadn't shown up, Justin began to worry. He called home repeatedly, but no one answered. By the time his shift ended at 2:30 p.m., that worry had turned into panic. Accompanied by his co-worker and friend Chuck Chance, Justin drove straight to their duplex at 219 North Park Avenue. What he found there would change his life forever. Jennifer's car was still parked in the driveway. Her husband's lunch was visible on the passenger seat, the banana inside already browning from the midday heat, evidence that she had never left to deliver it. The front door was unlocked. Inside, the apartment was dark. The bedroom appeared to be in order, but small clues suggested something was off. The bed had been sat on, and a soda can was spilled on the floor. The sense of something terribly wrong grew stronger with every step. Then, in the kitchen, came the horrifying discovery. Jennifer was lying on the floor, the blade of a kitchen knife lodged in her back. She had been stabbed multiple times. Some sources state 9 wounds, others say more than a dozen. The weapon had come from a knife set the couple had received as a wedding gift, opened just days earlier. The handle of the knife was missing. It had been a violent, intimate killing, and it left no room for doubt that Jennifer Judd had been deliberately targeted. In many ways, the crime scene defied conventional explanation. There was no sign of forced entry. Jennifer's keys were found on the floor inside, and her purse and other valuables had not been taken. Her car, with the keys accessible, remained untouched. Investigators quickly concluded that this was not a robbery gone wrong. It was a personal attack. Despite its limited footprint, the duplex held more clues. There were indications of a struggle, especially in the kitchen and bedroom areas. The spilled soda, the indentation on the bed, and the disarray in the apartment suggested that a confrontation had occurred prior to the fatal stabbing. According to a Reddit post by someone claiming to be Jennifer's cousin, there were also reports of blood evidence in other areas of the home, as well as damage to household items. Although these details were never officially confirmed by law enforcement. The most haunting element, however, may have been the murder weapon itself. A kitchen knife, a symbol of new beginnings and domestic life, used to destroy the very future it represented. That level of psychological cruelty pointed investigators toward a deeply personal motive, and Jennifer had reportedly been afraid. In the days leading up to her murder, Jennifer had confided in family that something wasn't right. Approximately a week before her death, someone had reportedly attempted to break into the couple's duplex. The event left Jennifer shaken. She began experiencing nightmares, and her father had even begun escorting her to and from work. This detail, only later revealed through podcast interviews and family accounts, suggests that Jennifer may have been stalked or watched prior to the murder. Despite its significance, it's unclear how aggressively this earlier incident was pursued by investigators at the time. There is no public record of follow-up or suspect identification related to the attempted break-in. The case was initially handled by the Baxter Springs Police Department, with assistance from the Cherokee County Sheriff's Office and the Kansas Bureau of Investigation, KBI. From the outset, law enforcement reportedly focused their suspicion on someone close to the Judds, possibly a friend or acquaintance. Attention quickly turned to Chuck Chance, the friend who had accompanied Justin home and made the initial 911 call, reportedly too distraught to continue, leaving Justin to take over. Chuck had been a schoolmate of both Justin and Jennifer, and had even stood beside them as a groomsman in their wedding just 9 days earlier. But as soon as police arrived at the scene, Chuck became the prime suspect. According to transcripts shared in the Who Killed Jennifer Judd podcast, KBI agent Larry Thomas later told another suspect, "There's no doubt I could probably charge Chuck Chance based on the witness information, but I don't think I can convict him." The implication was clear. Law enforcement believed Chance was involved, or at least knew more than he admitted, but lacked the physical evidence to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. Chuck would remain a person of interest for more than a decade. In the years that followed, serious concerns were raised about how the crime scene was initially handled. A Reddit post attributed to a family member expressed frustration that too many people had been allowed into the apartment, potentially contaminating critical evidence. Some investigators, the poster claimed, behaved inappropriately, smirking and cutting up, as they processed the scene. There were reports of hair found at the scene that did not match either Justin Judd or Chuck Chance. Whether those samples were ever preserved or tested using modern DNA techniques remains unclear. Compounding these concerns were claims that the scene had not been properly secured, and that the handling of physical evidence may have compromised the investigation from the start. Around 2004, the case took a startling turn. Jeremy Brian Jones, a convicted murderer on death row in Alabama, confessed to the murder of Jennifer Judd. Jones, who had briefly lived with Justin Judd in early 1992, had a well-documented history of violence. He was ultimately convicted of the 2004 rape and murder of a woman in Alabama, and would later claim responsibility for as many as 20 killings across multiple states. Jennifer's friend, Michelle McCorkle, described Jones not just as Justin's acquaintance, but as a close friend of Jennifer's as well, raising new questions about his access and potential motive. During the original investigation, Justin had reportedly named Jones as a possible suspect, citing his interest in Jennifer. Despite the confession and prior ties to the couple, Jones's admission was dismissed by the KBI. According to unofficial accounts, he did not provide enough specific details about the crime scene to convince investigators he had truly been there. He would later recant his confession, along with all the others he made during that period. Critics have since argued that this dismissal was premature. Forensic experts working with the Who Killed Jennifer Judd podcast pointed out that a fingerprint found on the blade of the murder weapon did not match Jennifer, Justin, or Chuck, and questioned whether it was ever compared to Jeremy Jones. Through the efforts of independent investigator Sarah Kalin, host of the podcast, a third suspect came to light: Alan Redden. Redden's name had not been widely known in connection with Jennifer's case until Kalin's inquiry revealed disturbing details. In May 1992, just 11 days after Jennifer's death, Redden was arrested for armed robbery. At the time, he told investigators that he had been at work on the day of the murder. That alibi went unchallenged for years until, around 2000, employment records surfaced, showing that Redden had not worked that day. It was his first ever recorded absence from the job. Redden also had a violent history, including a conviction for rape 3 years after Jennifer's murder. At one point, he was a registered sex offender. Despite these red flags, Redden was never charged or formally named a suspect. Still, his presence in the area, his disproven alibi, and his criminal background make him one of the most compelling persons of interest to emerge from the podcast's independent reinvestigation. As science advanced, so too did the potential for resolution. With assistance from forensic expert Rana Della Rocco, Sarah Kalin's team submitted multiple pieces of evidence for modern testing. These included carpet samples, which may have contained the killer's blood if he was injured during the attack, Jennifer's red Keds sneakers, tested for touch DNA, and previously collected items like a blood-stained towel. One of the most significant pieces of forensic evidence remains the fingerprint on the knife blade. According to the podcast, this print has never been matched to a known individual. If verified, it could serve as a key to identifying the killer, assuming proper comparisons are made and that the print is still viable. Today, more than 30 years later, the murder of Jennifer Judd remains an officially unsolved homicide. A $5,000 governor's reward is still being offered for information leading to an arrest and conviction. But for Jennifer's family and friends, closure has remained heartbreakingly out of reach. This case isn't just about evidence or timelines. It's about a woman full of life whose future was stolen before it had a chance to begin. It's about a husband who lost his wife, a friend who became a suspect, a killer who may have confessed and then been ignored, and a town still waiting for justice. The question that began in 1992 still echoes today. Who killed Jennifer Judd? Until that answer is found, the pain remains. But so does the hope, kept alive by a podcast, a fingerprint, and a family that refuses to let her be forgotten.
First impressions.
All right, guys. What are your first impressions on this case?
I mean, firstly, it's just really unfortunate it happened 9 days after she got married to her high school sweetheart.
Yeah, that's
You know what I mean? Like, that's like the first thing, I guess that's the emotional side to it kind of hits too, is like, man, like just young, 20, just got married.
all-American kid.
Yeah, right in the heart of America, Southeast Kansas.
Do you think about like the things that happen in these small towns that, you know, probably someone that she knew, because what are the chances of somebody just passing through is going to know where she lives, have access and be there? So it just kind of leaves all these unanswered questions that is like somebody knows what happened, and for all these years it just kind of sat on it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
The emotional weight feels heavy.
9 stab wounds is a lot. You know, that's very violent. That's
Usually
very personal.
My initial reaction to this case is one that's similar to a lot of the cases we've looked at, and it's just how botched the crime scene was and how it was turned into basically a circus for all the different off-duty police officers that came in. Anybody that had a blue light they could put on their car came code blue, code red to the scene and just walked all through it and trashed it. And, you know, we hear that a lot, especially from cases in the early 90s and specifically from southeast Kansas.
I agree with you, Joe. I think that if the crime scene would have been preserved properly and proper crime scene protocol would have been, in effect, someone was in a leadership position there to make that happen that way, then the evidence could have been collected in a manner that it could have been used to probably solve it within the month, if not that day, that night. So I think that the evidence not being properly collected has definitely been why we don't know who did it yet.
Yeah, it has to be the case. I mean, if they would have taken more samples, if there was more evidence today to test, we would certainly know the answer.
And a question for me is, the attempted entry into the duplex a week prior, of course, is that related to what happened to her? I would love to know more of what she went through. It says that she was deeply fearful. Were there things that she didn't share with anyone? Like if something happened, like if there's just more details that could help.
Yeah, my initial thoughts were, is she being stalked, and did she feel like someone was watching her?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because a week, that's not like a long time period. You could think, oh, I'm making it up, or I'm imagining it, or, what else happened that maybe you don't know about.
And you got to think of what also happened the week before, and that's the wedding.
Right.
So the wedding happens, and immediately she feels unsafe for whatever reason.
They came home from their honeymoon early. They went to Branson, and they did come home early. They weren't getting along well, and so they came home early from that. And then Justin, I think, was just settling back into work. It might have been his first or second day back. He was just getting back to work after the wedding. So
would you say that she had turbulent relationships?
Right. We've got Jeremy Jones.
Right.
And we've got
Chuck.
Chuck Chance.
Chuck.
Alan Redden.
Yeah, Alan.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I just think
Jennifer the type of person that if she was paranoid and whatnot, would she have shared it with her friends, or would she have kept it to herself?
She would have, but she did not. She did
would
not.
have?
In this case, she was working at the Pitcher Express convenience store. And there was, I had heard that, she was asking her dad to follow her home from Pitcher to Baxter each night. And this wasn't very long because she just gotten married. So I don't know if she was scared before the wedding or if it happened after. I'm not sure of that time frame, but her closest friends today still wish they knew exactly what that fear was about. They didn't know.
When you just said that, I thought, why wasn't it her husband following her and it was her dad? I wonder if he was working, but that question just came to mind. Why wasn't it her husband instead?
Or even going to pick her up.
Yeah.
Unless it was a scheduled conflict, right?
Yeah.
I was wondering, one of the things that came up on one of the podcasts that I listened to had talked about her finding a substance in the bathroom that was white that looked to be probably meth, and knowing the involvement with Jeremy and methamphetamines. And I don't know what her husband was like, but I know my family who's from that area and their involvement in drugs. If it was something that she mentioned something to someone and they just removed her from that situation.
She definitely seems to me to have been the innocent type. And so, maybe it is that she stumbled into something bigger than she was ready to handle.
Jennifer was certainly squeaky clean. She did go to church every Sunday. She went to the Cardin Baptist Church. Her parents made sure she was still there, even as an older teen and everything. And, Jennifer wasn't into the drug scene. She wasn't out drinking. I mean, yeah, she did her time, having fun with us as kids and stuff, but she wasn't into the party scene at all. She was not for drugs at all. She was completely against drugs. So that's not something that would have been in or around their home or her home as far as I'm concerned. But you never know, with Justin trying to hide, who knows? He could have been trying to hide something. Some background on her, not a drug user, not associated with known drug users.
The only reason I brought it up is Jeremy's my cousin, and my granny was a very good Christian woman who grew up in Quapaw, and there's part of my family who, every time I was around, we're singing gospel songs. But there is this other element that kind of floats around in some of these small towns that goes through the police force, that goes through everyone, and not everybody sees exactly what's kind of floating underneath the surface, and that sometimes puts people in dangerous positions that they don't even realize that they're in, when you just see the church side of people and you don't necessarily see some of the other sides of what's going on.
Yeah, people will tend to gravitate towards squeaky clean people, meaning for some people it's a thing for them.
Like an opposites attract
right,
scenario.
Yeah, and no doubt that this is something that, I just think oftentimes, especially back then, we're encouraged. People get married way too young, and they were getting married too young back then, and it was often, that's just what you did, and it really almost didn't matter what was happening behind closed doors.
Theory time.
Initially, they thought Chuck was responsible, and the KBI even said, hey, we could charge him, but we couldn't make it stick, so we didn't. Any thoughts why he was the one that they looked at? Do you think it was just like, oh, he's the friend? His
weird changing of clothes, and
his fingerprint didn't match the one on the knife, but they still kept him as the primary suspect for a long time.
We had the window of time, maybe.
I think he was just an easy person to pick at the time, because Justin was at work. The change of clothes didn't help, and also they tried to make a whole bunch out of where he was when, and try to make it all seem that he was creating an alibi. Well, he did. If he was at all these other places doing what he said he did, then he would have had a very short window of time probably to commit a murder.
Probably doesn't take very long to get it done. Susan, maybe you can touch on this one. Was there any kind of jealousy between Chuck and Justin?
I don't know anything about that. Plus, Justin was so jealous. If Chuck hinted in any way, shape, or form that he liked Jennifer, there's no way he would have been around at all. Okay. And they had just spent the previous evening playing softball and stuff. So, yeah, Justin would have put a stop to Chuck coming around if he felt that was there. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't change a person how they react. But Chuck was also married and had a child, too. So Chuck was still a 21-year-old young man, so he probably wasn't been flirty or something, but I don't think Justin would have allowed Chuck to be around him.
What were Justin's parents like, and how did they feel about her?
Oh, okay. So Jennifer never disliked any other person or never spoke poorly or badly of any other person, but she did not like Justin's mom,
Pam.
And it was very mutual, and it was very well known.
So that kind of solidifies my theory, which I think all comes back around. The biggest indicator to me is his forgotten lunch. How convenient. He forgot his lunch that day. Whatever happened after she was in the car, because the lunch was in the car.
I don't think he forgot his lunch that day.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
He intentionally left his lunch behind so that his wife would have to bring it to him. She got to the car Excuse me, I'm excited. She got to the car, his lunch in the car, and then for some reason left the car because the food was in the car getting baked by the sun.
I think that whole thing was staged.
That's what I'm saying. Yes, absolutely.
Well, and then was
Yes,
I mean, I don't think that. I think he had his lunch. I don't think he ever called for his lunch, and I don't think he had anything to do with that lunch being in the front seat of that car.
Do you think? So, are you saying that Justin said no? So then, why is the lunch in the car? Do you think that Justin put a? See, I'm having a hard time following, I guess, your train of thought because, in my point of view, he intentionally. This is just theory, he intentionally left his lunch behind so that he could call for the lunch and maybe not be surprised.
Well, there's no record of him making a call for a lunch, one. Okay. And two, I think the lunch was put in there after the fact, so there would be, he could say he called and say he
still
forgot
Justin,
his lunch.
but
Still
now
Justin.
He's planted a lunch.
And now a lunch has been planted.
So, okay.
Because
I see that.
I think his lunch was probably at work with him in the nice cooler that Jennifer's father gave her for him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
That's what I think.
Her Jennifer's sister Amanda is a few years younger than Jennifer, and that's one thing that Amanda said. It didn't sit right with her that Justin's lunch was in a brown paper bag. It wouldn't have been. It would have been in that cooler.
Wow.
Yeah,
and
That's huge.
The reason, it was just odd that it was sitting in the front seat in a brown paper bag. It wouldn't have been there. It would have been in a cooler. So,
And for her sister to speak up about such a little
She would've
detail
known.
and just know that's huge.
and the soda can wasn't a brand that Jennifer would have drank either. So it's believed that whoever came to the home brought it with them.
Like the killer brought their own
Yeah.
sack lunch.
My thought kind of that sets it off is that it's weird to me that I think, maybe Justin did make that call. Maybe he did it beforehand.
They are only the record of the calls that came from the place that he worked.
Yeah.
There was only one call made before 6, and it was the security officer calling to see if Justin was there, which was the exact time he said he made a call.
Yeah,
so there's no
weird.
other record of a call going to her house.
So
at that
one thing I
time.
don't see at all in this is what was the actual time of death? Did they ever declare an actual time of death?
They didn't take the temperature, internal temperature, so they never were able to really.
See, so that to
get
me
it.
is what if it was done beforehand? He just went to work and through one second was just able to plan it all.
It's
Oh, I
possible.
called. I never did this. Definitely, if it's so tumultuous, it's like this huge turbulence that's always
I
happening.
think that the blood would have been coagulated in such a manner that probably would have been mentioned. I also think that there would have been flies developing because we're talking like 6 hours.
Mm-hmm.
I think there would have been plenty of evidence for them. I think if there had been a very long time between the death and the time they got home from work, I think that would have been noted somehow. Just
not
by
even
the-
I guess I'm not familiar enough with decomp and all that. So you're saying even right before he left for work, this probably couldn't have happened?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I think there would have been some kind of evidence, there would have been some rigidity for certain.
And would the police have known to look for that? Would they have understood that?
I don't think you could miss it. It's
Okay.
different.
Yeah.
You know?
There was also, maybe not in our notes here, but I have seen where she made a call to a family friend in Pitcher to schedule a tanning appointment.
That's right.
And that call was at about 10, and she planned to do her tan at 3 and then go to work after that. So I believe that the phone record was able to show that there was an outgoing call that lasted a couple of minutes for her to talk to the family friend that had the tanning bed in Pitcher, or it was actually in Cardinal.
So that narrows it down to 2 to 4 hours right there.
Yeah, and then she was found at 2:40.
Right.
So I was getting ready to ask what her schedule was like that day, if she had to be at work or if she was somewhere and she wasn't at that place. So that helps a lot.
And then there was a car scene by their house, and supposedly a woman who, they had asked whether or not it could have been Justin's mom, and I guess the answer was if she was wearing a wig.
Yeah, Chuck said that it could have been just his mom if she was wearing a wig.
Weird.
Maybe she was wearing a wig.
Right, exactly. Back then in the 90s, it wouldn't have been really that crazy to think of.
That's
But
just a
I think that the
strange
crime
statement.
scene shows that the person didn't plan anything. It didn't
was
seem
an
premeditated.
act
It
of passion.
looked like she knew them, and they just grabbed the knife
Just
that was there.
explosive moment.
I think
and-
there's other things about that crime scene too that indicate a lot specifically, her body wasn't covered in any way. It was just left there on display, which is, there was no sign of remorse, which is somebody that, all murder is personal, I believe, but it shows that this person had anger toward them. I think had the knife blade not busted, or the handle, I think there would have been more stab wounds. I think that I'd love to know what size footprint that was.
You have to stab someone pretty hard to break the handle off of a brand new
and I'm
knife.
sure that
trying to pull it out.
and I'm sure, and it was mentioned, I'm sure the killer's blood was there
Has to be if you stabbed
for
and
somebody to.
Without a knife guard, you'd
Yeah.
certainly stab your
Yeah,
hand.
so I think a lot of that indicates to me that it was a woman.
And then what about Justin? It said in one of the reports that he came home and he put on a glove when he entered the house.
Yeah, the workout glove, and punched the wall. He punched the wall either right before or right after the 911 call, but took the time to put his workout glove on to do so.
If that was a countermeasure, that would make it look like more of a struggle occurred in that house than it did, but that just still doesn't make any sense for him to admit it.
Yeah, and then, Justin wants to point out how Chuck's wearing odd clothing and everything, and apparently Chuck was wearing odd clothing, and honestly, I do believe Chuck was just out running errands and trying to find a job that day.
It's just it's really sad, and nothing that we can do can bring her back. And it's kind of like what does
final thoughts
justice look like? And I think one of the best things to do is probably sharing about her life and having venues where people can talk and present memories and keep her alive in that way. We may never unfortunately know what happened, but her life can mean something.
I think that same thing I say every week is that I always wonder who had the motive and who had the opportunity.
Yeah, the why.
And the why. And I think that that's how I choose to look at this case, and one of the ways I choose to look at this case, I should say. And it's kind of easy to see who didn't have those things and narrow it down to, I think, probably somebody on Justin's side, the family knows a lot more than what they're sharing. I'll just leave it at that. Also, I just think that Cherokee County should publicly and loudly reopen this case. And it's fresh enough. I mean, the new evidence that they're submitting is fresh enough that they could start making more about that.
Was there ever a reward for
There's
evidence
a $5,000
or coming forward?
$5,000 governor's reward. A lot of times that's what worked, that's what helped in the Ashley Freeman Laura Bible case, was them getting loud about it again, and somebody came forward. So I would like to see that happen again, and any evidence be resubmitted if there's any available.
Yeah, if we think about what Jennifer's life would have been today, most of us have grandchildren now, and she never even got to have children, and she would have had children and would have loved them so much and been a great mom. That's what she wanted to do. So
That's sweet.
I really appreciate you being on the show today.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks for asking.
It's been wonderful to have you here because it's helped, transport us back into that time, just to hear it directly from you, what it was like, what she was like, just little details that we wouldn't hear elsewhere. So this has been great.
So next week we will be investigating the Springfield 3. So make sure to tune in for that. Till next time, this has been Ozark Crime Watch. We'll see you then. Thanks. Bye.
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 Oh.